case you missed it, Antonio Brown to the Patriots?
Oh, that's
as if Tom Brady needed another target.
Belichick gets yet another weapon.
I love that you guys talk about
and
this
you don't
stuff,
care.
And I'm just like,
hey, I love your Gucci belt.
you know, man.
Listen,
he's got to pick on like the very few. I don't even own a car or a home. Basically, all my money is in this belt.
It's a nice belt.
It's a nice belt.
Well,
that's all I'm pointing out.
Thank you.
Well, you're looking fabulous as always. How's it going? Nice
It's
Saturday.
going well. It's going. We had a lot of kicking last night. We had a lot of tumble salts. Every time I go for a sonogram, they say, you have a very active baby.
Yeah.
And that makes me a little nervous, Pete, because that means he's going to come out and he might just be jumping all over the walls.
A Bila boy?
Yeah.
Well, I'm
watch
happy.
out.
There's a lot happening
Maybe this boy is hearing you talk about how you're going to treat your dog the same way as the kid. And he's already saying, he's speaking up for himself.
Yeah.
I like
Sometimes
it.
he kicks on the couch, and I'm wondering if he has a problem with what I'm saying or what you guys are saying. We'll figure that out soon enough.
We will figure it out. But we're fired up this morning. Lots of news, and starting with this one, a big one, a Fox News alert. President Trump reveals he canceled a meeting with Taliban leaders set for today after a U.S. Army paratrooper was killed by the group, the Taliban, in a suicide bombing.
Talks of a deal with the Taliban in Afghanistan now seemingly at a standstill as the president puts the Taliban on notice.
Mark Meredith joins us live from Washington. Good morning, Mark.
And good morning to you, Jen and I. President Trump surprised a lot of people last night when he tweeted out that he had planned to hold a secret meeting with major Taliban leaders and leaders from Afghanistan at Camp David this weekend. But the president says the meeting was canceled last minute after a suicide bombing in Kabul on Thursday. In that attack, 12 people were killed, including a U.S. service member. The president tweeted out about the now canceled Afghanistan peace talks meeting, writing, quote, "What kind of people would kill so many in order to seemingly strengthen their bargaining position? They didn't. They only made it worse. If they cannot agree to a ceasefire during these very important peace talks and would even kill 12 innocent people, then they probably don't have the power to negotiate a meaningful agreement anyway." The body of the American soldier killed in Thursday's attack, Army First Class Sergeant Ellis Barreto Ortiz, arrived back in the United States late yesterday. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was among those who paid their respects at Delaware's Dover Air Force Base as Ortiz's body returned back to the United States. Now, the president does not have any public events on his schedule today, but we're going to be watching Twitter to see if he adds any more on this topic throughout the day. Pete, Ed, and Jedediah, back to you guys.
All right, Mark, thank you for that report. Interesting, because remember, as a businessman, President Trump, then businessman Trump lashed out at Barack Obama for potentially sitting down to talk with the Taliban. Now he realizes years later that you've got to try to find some way to end the war in Afghanistan, but they're not a reliable partner, and sitting down with them could be a major mistake.
Yeah. Ending the war is different than signing a bad peace deal. And that's what's been happening over time. The nonstop nation building in Afghanistan, unacceptable to everybody. But at the same time, you cannot cut a deal with totalitarian Islamists who ultimately, inside this deal, the reason Pompeo wouldn't sign it, it doesn't guarantee American presence of counterterrorism forces, doesn't guarantee the survival of the Afghan government, and doesn't end the fighting. The Taliban says, well, we'll sign a deal with you, and then we'll keep fighting until we control Kabul and then all of Afghanistan, which, if this is about America first, you can't have a deal like that. So the ambassador, Zalmay Khalilzad, who's been cutting this deal, there's been a lot of I'm very close to a lot of people very close to this. I don't know where that puts me. Very close to people very close.
Kind of far, but yeah, all right.
Pretty much far. But they say, hey, he's lunging at a bad deal, which would put us in a place where the Taliban would take over again, which is the last place we want to be.
I just don't understand how you ever negotiate with the Taliban and expect them to come to the table well-intentioned and trustworthy. Even if they come to the table and say something that you like, I don't know how you can count on them to follow through on that.
They won't. They'll lie to you.
After all, so I don't really know what you do. I feel like as a commander-in-chief, you're between a rock and a hard place because you realize you have to make some kind of attempt to get an agreement, but at the same time, you recognize that you're dealing with people who may not hold true to what they say. It may backfire, and it may have a consequence for American troops in the region as a result.
And then you get ISIS 2.0.
Right.
You know, and then you've got a caliphate on your hands again in a second term, which is the last thing.
Searing, especially the idea that these talks would have happened on the eve of the 9/11 anniversary, given that the Taliban, this is where it all started with al-Qaeda, essentially, with the Taliban harboring terrorists in Afghanistan. Joey Jones, a retired U.S. Marine Corps bomb technician, a Fox News contributor, among many expressing skepticism about what the Taliban is really doing here. Watch.
The first thing I would do today is every time one of our soldiers dies overseas during these talks, I would go down to Guantanamo and I would execute a Taliban captive. We have to show them that we're not just looking for an exit strategy. But if they understand that we're not going to let them do the things they've done before, to include 9/11 or harboring people like that, then we might have a place of negotiation. But the way it is right now, they're killing us while we're talking to them about territory they can keep that we spent 20 years taking away from them or fighting them over.
Yeah, and the president himself made that point in his tweets when he revealed this last night. You heard from Mark Meredith, the president saying you killed at least one U.S. service member just in the last couple of days on top of all the civilians that were killed. Not a way to walk into peace talks and try to show credibility.
If you understand the psychology of the Taliban, Joey Jones is totally right. Every time they kill one of ours, one of yours at Guantanamo is gone. Instead, you've got Guantanamo Bay captives at the table negotiating the very peace deal that we can't stand. To your point, it's hard to see what the solution is. Yeah. Sometimes doing nothing is better than signing that bad deal. It's like the Israeli-Palestinian peace deal. A bad peace deal for land is bad. In this case, keep killing them, prevent them from taking over, wear them down without a huge American presence. We can't stay there forever.
Well, that's just it, too. Heading into 2020, President Trump probably has a lot of heat to withdraw those troops.
Does he have any heat? Where's the heat?
I think so.
I don't think there are any voters out there saying, well, are we out of Afghanistan yet?
Well,
that's just, it's like number 25 on their list.
Yeah, but I think there's that libertarian wing and those independent voters where that issue matters to them, and he's trying to target them because he knows that Joe Biden, who is now the front runner, is going to go right after them on that
ISIS
as well.
2.0,
yeah, I agree with
problem.
you, just from politically, though.
Yeah.
As we talk about 2020, though, 2020 is heating up. Do you guys feel the fire? I feel the fire. Democrats are flocking to New Hampshire's Democratic Convention. They're rallying voters. And guess what? You've got the likes of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders targeting Joe Biden, saying now is not the time to play it safe with, they didn't say this, but I'm saying it, a guy like Joe. Take a listen.
We can't choose a candidate we don't believe in because we're scared.
We can't make the mistake that says, oh, we got to play it safe. This election is just about finding somebody who can beat Donald Trump.
We're not going to win by just trying to be safe. We're going to win by being bold. We're going to win by being fearless.
Every single time we have tried to play it safe with the most established and, let's say, Washington tenured figures, every single time we've come up short.
We have got to energize our base, and we've got to pull Trump voters in.
Yeah, interesting. You see them all starting to take aim. It took them a long time because at first they were all trying to play nice, but they're realizing that even after some of the debates, Biden hasn't really dropped in the polls. He's still the front runner, but they believe he's a soft runner, and they want to go after the soft front runner, and they want to go after him. They want to bring him down.
Yeah. Do you think they're all sitting there like, how is this guy still in the lead, given all the gaffes? The fact that he, oftentimes when I hear him, I don't even know what he's saying anymore. It doesn't make sense. He says he was places that he wasn't. He's mixing up states. I mean, this stuff is getting crazy. I wonder if they're all saying to themselves, now's the time we need to step in and really try to knock this guy out of the way, because even though he's making all these mistakes, it's not happening organically. He's still in the lead.
And he hasn't defined a rationality for his candidacy. You know, reports recently show that he's basically walking back from Iowa and New Hampshire. South Carolina is his firewall because he thinks he have a big portion of the black vote there and other supporters. We'll see where that goes. Well, Mike Huckabee, who has a tendency to cut to the chase on what really is going on, here he is on Joe Biden's candidacy right now.
Well, I think everybody's been too hard on Joe Biden. I mean, for heaven's sakes, this is a man who's done so many things for his country. Let me give you a couple examples. Joe and I fought together storming the beaches of Normandy at D-Day. We were there. Then later we stormed the beaches of Guadalcanal. And if you don't believe that happened, I want to tell you something. Brian Williams has the video footage at NBC to get every bit of it. Cut him some slack. He's had a tough time. And I think people are underestimating this guy who said he was going to take President Trump out behind the schoolhouse and beat him up. I want to see these two on stage. I really do.
And the president is making that clear for a long time, that he wants to go mano-a-mano with Joe Biden. You hear this chatter among Democrats in recent months that Biden could win in states like Pennsylvania, that President Trump flipped. I'm not so sure he can, because all of a sudden you see how light he is on some of these things and how he doesn't have fire in the belly. He doesn't have the energy and enthusiasm that the left wants. And so they heard this in 2016. Go with the safe one, Hillary Clinton. She can beat Trump. The safe one didn't win. They want to go with their hearts this time.
We hear that about Romney, McCain. It's like the same story over and over again. I'm with, I get what Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are saying. I do think you need someone that makes people excited. They have to be excited to get out and vote for you. Joe Biden is not exciting anyone right now. He just looks unprepared, and he looks like a guy who doesn't want the job, which is the worst part of it to me.
Yeah, he's running because, well, it's my time to run, which is a bad reason to run. And if your biggest selling point is, I can beat Trump, or I can debate him, and then people start to realize, can you really? Then it undercuts the reason you're running in the first place. And so if you're a Democrat right now, I mean, there's nobody fired up. We send Peter Doocy and all these folks out to the field, and they try to find rabid Joe Biden supporters. They don't exist.
It's not happening.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to turn to some headlines for you now, beginning with a Fox News alert. Dorian now heading north as a post-tropical cyclone. It's expected to make landfall in Canada again today. The storm's powerful winds and heavy rain toppling a massive crane onto an apartment building in Nova Scotia. Luckily, no one was hurt. The powerful storm causing floodwaters to rise so high, people had to be rescued from their attics in North Carolina. Further south, a cruise ship dropping off more than 1,400 evacuees in Florida from the Bahamas after Hurricane Dorian wreaked havoc on the islands. At least 43 people have died in the hurricane. And the search for the final victim of that horrific boat fire in California has been postponed. Search crews blamed high winds for the delay and vowed to be back out tomorrow. 34 people were killed when a dive boat caught fire and sank. They're believed to have died from smoke inhalation. And Kevin Hart's car reportedly lacked key safety features that could have prevented his injuries in a horrific car crash last weekend. Classic car experts telling TMZ the 1970 Plymouth Barracuda didn't have advanced seatbelt harnesses or a roll cage, which they say is unusual for such high-powered vehicles. The actor who was not driving the vehicle reportedly suffered 3 spinal fractures when the car crashed into a ditch.
And I'll take this little sports.
Go ahead.
I'm thrilling that game.
Jim Harbaugh not living up to expectations a minute.
Yes.
All right. Meanwhile, actress Kirstie Alley calling out Hollywood over their latest anti-Trump attacks. What she said that has everybody talking this morning. Not what you expect from Hollywood, put it that way. And we are back with this Fox News alert just days before the 9/11 anniversary. The president revealing he canceled secret talks with Taliban leaders that was supposed to happen at Camp David after the Taliban claimed responsibility for a bombing that killed a U.S. soldier and 11 others in Kabul last week. Here to weigh in, Fox News contributor, former CIA station chief Daniel Hoffman. Good morning, Daniel.
Great to see you, Ed.
It's great to see you. What is your immediate reaction, first of all, to the president taking this unprecedented step of revealing that he was about to have secret talks? And what do you think happens next?
Well, I think the president made the right decision. It's absolutely right for him and the administration to question whether the Taliban negotiators in Doha in Qatar have the will or the capacity to influence the Taliban and their growing militant attacks on the government in Kabul and coalition forces.
Yeah, and I thought Pete made an important point earlier about you want to end the war in Afghanistan, but you, after a couple of decades, of course, but you want to do it in a way that's responsible and making sure we do not leave a safe haven for terrorists where 9/11 started, frankly. How do we do that?
You know, I spent a good portion of my CIA career serving in that region, and what I'll tell you about all of us out there, military, State Department, CIA, intelligence officers, we were all proud to be out there, proud to serve, proud to preempt threats before they're visited on our shores. That's really the lesson of 9/11. And while we're not going to fix Afghanistan's failed state petri dish, we kind of need to be there in some form or fashion to ensure that the threats that are there, Al-Qaeda among them and ISIS, don't present ongoing threats to our national security.
Absolutely. And the man who's going to have to explain that this morning, he'll be on Fox News Sunday and other programs, of course, is Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. And he went out to his home of Kansas, gave the Landon lecture. Remember Alf Landon, the late governor of Kansas. This is a tradition for Kansas politicians or former Kansas politicians. Here's what he said about America. I want you to react. Watch.
America and Americanism is something that we've got to be proud of. I think sometimes some of us take things for granted. Our glorious history shouldn't be revised, it should be revered. And the truest expression of that reverence is to safeguard and live by the principles by which this country was founded and those people who forged this unique place.
Seems like an important point at this time in history.
Yeah, it evoked memories for me of President Reagan's farewell speech in 1989, City on a Hill, especially at a time when human rights are being trampled on from Moscow to Hong Kong, among other places. Those are our values: freedom, liberty, democracy, enshrined in our Constitution and Bill of Rights, and that does make America exceptional. Absolutely. Daniel Hoffman, Fox News contributor, we appreciate you coming in early this Sunday. Thank you. Always a pleasure. Many Christians, meanwhile, now outraged over how 2020 hopeful Pete Buttigieg is justifying abortion.
There's a lot of parts of the Bible that talk about how life begins with breath.
So, does life begin with breath? And some quick headlines. MIT's Media Lab director is stepping down after backlash over accepting donations linked to Jeffrey Epstein. Joy Ito resigning one day after the New Yorker reported the school intentionally hid its connection to the disgraced financier. MIT calling it a mistake in judgment. And the maker of OxyContin is expected to file for bankruptcy amid a massive lawsuit. Purdue Pharma turning down settlement offers in North Carolina and Tennessee, stalling negotiations on how much to pay American families impacted by this opioid crisis. At least 30 states have sued the company, accusing it of fueling the epidemic. Pete?
Thanks, Ed. Well, 2020 candidate Pete Buttigieg is no stranger to invoking his Christian faith when on the campaign trail. But now he's drawing on the Bible to defend abortion.
There's a lot of parts of the Bible that talk about how life begins with breath. No matter where you think about the kind of cosmic question of how life begins, most Americans can get on the board with the idea of, all right, I might draw the line here, you might draw the line there, but the most important thing is the person who should be drawing the line is the woman making the decision.
Joining us now to react is senior pastor at First Baptist Church and Fox News contributor, Pastor Robert Jeffress. Pastor, thanks for being here this morning. I know you're fired up about this, using the Bible to justify abortion.
You know, Pete, on Thursday, Buttigieg accused conservative Christians like myself of twisting the Bible to support our position on immigration. When it comes to twist, is used to describe a little baby, and there is no difference in God's sight. And look, science has confirmed what the Bible says. We know through medical technology that baby in a mother's womb is not some biological blob. It is a human being. Has presented Democrats with an inconvenient truth when it comes to life inside the womb.
It's a great point. Now, we reported on this yesterday, and the Buttigieg campaign put out a statement based on our reporting. They said this. They said this is, of course, a massive distortion of what Pete said and just the latest false attack on Pete this week. Pete will continue to focus on how he is the right candidate to address the urgency of the moment. We are clearly in a message that is clearly resonating with folks all across the country. Is this resonating with voters?
Oh, listen, I think it's resonating very clearly in the sense that Pete Buttigieg got caught. Fox and Friends caught him. That you've got the tape. He was saying that the Bible supports abortion because it says life begins at breath. Anybody, a third grader, knows reading the Bible that it's talking about the breath of God, not the breath of a baby that begins life.
Absolutely. Well, he wasn't the only one to make a comment about abortion this week. Bernie Sanders, at a climate change town hall on Wednesday on another network, said this about abortion. Watch.
Especially in poor countries around the world, where women do not necessarily want to have large numbers of babies, and where they can have the opportunity through birth control to control the number of kids they have, something I very, very strongly support.
So if you want to fight climate change, you need to be in support of abortion.
Look, what Bernie Sanders said, using abortion to curb population growth in third world countries, that is not only racist, but it's also reminiscent of Margaret Sanger for her reason for founding founding Planned Parenthood. She wanted to use abortion to curb the growth of the African-American population in America. And look, I think that's exactly why you see such an affinity between the Democrat Party and Planned Parenthood. They both have an affinity for racism. That's what this is. And Pete, the fact that no Democrat candidate has spoken out against what Bernie Sanders has said shows how barbaric and godless the Democrat Party has become.
Pastor, this is an honest question. Why is there such an alliance? Why is abortion number one, and next to climate change, for the modern Democratic Party? Why is this the hill they always want to die on?
I cannot figure it out, except that it's evidence that they are becoming a more and more godless party. And look, I think this is going to have great ramifications in 2020, Pete. You know, in 2016, there were some evangelicals who were on the fence until that third debate when President Trump eviscerated Hillary Clinton on the issue of abortion, showing she would put no restrictions. If you want to do it before the day a child is born, it's okay. Well, he won the evangelical vote in 2016 because of that. It's hard to imagine the Democrats have moved further to the left on abortion, and that's why I think President Trump is going to win 2020 by the largest margin in history of Christian voters.
And he's stood by it with the judges he has appointed to the bench. Pastor Robert Jeffress, thank you so much for your time, and check out his show, Pathway to Victory, on Fox Nation. Pastor, have a great Sunday. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pete.
You got it. All right, well, members of the so-called squad, I don't know how they earned that nickname, they're back at it, targeting President Trump and wrapping up calls for his impeachment. They're still at it. Will their push gain steam this time around? Jason Chaffetz, he used to hold a seat in Congress. You know him, you love him. Here he is.
Congress.
Well, thank you.
Former chair, of course, of the House Oversight Committee. Overnight breaking secret talks with the Taliban scheduled right before the 9/11 anniversary. There are Democrats criticizing the president that this would be happening, that he'd even be talking to the Taliban on the eve of the 9/11 anniversary. The others saying this might be a smart way to actually sit down and figure out a way to sensibly end the war in Afghanistan.
I think the heart of the president is in the right direction. He wants peace, and he's willing to sit down with anybody. It's interesting to me. I remember when Barack Obama first ran for president, people were highly critical when he said he'd sit down with everybody. I think the president, if you want different results, you're going to have to try something different. There are a lot of us that believe that you can't necessarily get to a negotiation conclusion with the Taliban. Can they actually control forces there in Afghanistan? Afghan President Ashraf Ghani is a good friend of the United States. I don't know if the president was convinced that he could actually get to that deal. I think that's in part why it broke down.
He's not even in the talks.
No, and that's part of the problem. And so much of this is cross-border with Pakistan. I mean, it's a terribly complicated situation. If it was easy, it would have been solved a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, can you make peace with totalitarian Islamists?
No, like these are radical terrorists that are not well controlled. They're not well organized. It's not as if you can go meet with a leader and then suddenly they can get the word out across the country. We have lost a lot of blood and a lot of money. And I think at this point we'd say God bless those Americans who have gone out and have served to do that. But I think this president, as much as anybody, wants to get to a point where there is peace. But I don't know that they were going to be able to achieve it. But let's try it. Why not try it after all these years?
Jason, I got to ask you about the I word, impeachment.
Yes.
It's not going away. You got members of the squad coming out and having renewed calls for impeachment.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
Where does this go? Does this go anywhere? And this is not going to help Democrats.
No, it gets to the point where you almost think, are they doing this to help Donald Trump? Because they have tried, think of all the spaghetti they have thrown at the wall trying to figure out if something would stick along the way. They don't have anything. They're trying to put impeachment into place so they can further their investigative powers in order to go out and do the campaign research for the Democrats going into 2020. But I think there's this boomerang effect that comes back and says, we get all the issues facing the United States of America. This is what you're going to be focused on?
Yeah, I mean, I think most Americans feel like we've moved past this, but Jerry Nadler has not. I mean, he's the chairman of a committee. They're going to keep going with the investigation. And he's got this nipping at his heels. This is Comrade Cortez. She tweeted, the president is corrupt and must be impeached. Ilhan Omar, this is insanely corrupt. There is so much of it since he has taken office that we don't need Mueller report for impeachment.
How convenient.
Will there be so much pressure that they actually still move forward with this?
Look, the president got one of the biggest enemas you could possibly get in that Mueller report. I mean, they looked at everything and came up with nothing. They have no facts. They tend to say, hey, look, this is the conclusion. Now let's go back and find some facts to back it up. But they haven't found anything. And you can't move forward on impeachment. I think there's like over 100 Democrats that are on board with this. But if you don't actually have facts to back it up, it's really hard to convince
Like you
the
said,
American
convenient.
people.
We heard for 2 years, wait for the Mueller report, then we'll impeach him. Then it comes out, they say, we don't need the Mueller report, let's impeach him.
Right.
Seems interesting. It seems like a perfect segue to your book, Power Grab, because this is what Democrats have been up to for a long time.
They do. They want to change. They want to negate the results of 2016, and for 2020, they want to change the rules of the road. They're going to. What I do in Power Grab in the book is talk about all the tools in Congress that they actually can use, levers of power, to change the narrative and to do these types of things, and then what they're doing outside of Congress to really affect the vote that I think Republicans and conservatives are just oblivious to. You have to go figure out and see what's going on there because it will have an effect in 2020.
It seems to me, just as an outsider, that it must be impossible to get anything done in Congress these days. It's so polarized. The left and right are on completely different sides of the spectrum. The vision for the country is so diametrically opposed. How do you guys get anything done? Is that even a realistic option?
Look at the opportunity costs of what's going on right now within the House Judiciary and House Oversight Committee. The FBI is in tatters. We just have Michael Horowitz detail 80-plus pages of how bad it is with Director Comey at the FBI. Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows asked for a hearing to hear from the Inspector General about how do we fix the FBI. Do you think that's a hearing that Congress is going to have? No. Instead, they're going to try to go back and talk about, something that happened before Donald Trump even became the president. It's just... They don't. It's all about, for Democrats, it's what I write about in Power Grab, it's all about power. And how they're going to get there is they want to change the narrative, and they want to just kind of death by 1,000 cuts, get after this president and affect the 2020 outcome.
So everyone, check out Jason's new book, Power Grab. He's also going to be sticking around because he's going to help me on a quiz coming up. We got a good quiz.
You better be helping me.
This is my phone a friend right here. You better know what you're doing, Jason. You're in trouble.
I'm going to go study.
We're doing a contest, and you're bringing him in to help you?
I got to phone a friend. You'll see why. You'll see.
You used a book yesterday to win the drawing president's thing, right?
I'm glad you're back, Henry. I'm glad you're back.
This shouldn't be that hard, actually.
You're on the naughty list.
All right, we're going to turn to some headlines for you now. 7 MS-13 gang members charged with murder. Police say they stabbed a rival gang member to death outside his Maryland apartment building. One of the MS-13 members allegedly using a machete-style knife. Detectives say the killing is linked to a war between MS-13 and rival gang 18th Street. Slamming Hollywood elites for shunning President Trump's supporters. Ali tweeting, quote, "I refuse to be part of the Hollywood expletive who can't see that not working with Republicans is as stupid and nasty as refusing to do business with gay people. Stop acting above the fray, you hypocrites. We are the same species. Let's help each other, you yahoos." I know. Last week, Will and Grace stars Eric McCormick and Deborah Messing called for the release of a list of Trump donors before an event in Los Angeles.
And by the way, Christy Alley, not like an outspoken Republican or Democrat, just sort of pointing it out.
Yeah, she's had it.
What's with the weather, meteorologist?
I like when I can read the prompter as you're going to see what words you're going to say. So like expletive, or were you going to make like a beep sound or something like that? And you missed one word down at the bottom there.
She did leave one word out.
Yes.
I know. All right. Hey, look at this. I'd like to leave that word out. 44 degrees in Caribou, Maine. So you know what that means. It's coming, but we've got really heat. It feels like summer across the south. This is what is left of Dorian, way up there across the Canadian Maritimes. Behind it, a little bit of cooler air, obviously right there for areas of Maine. And then big storms cutting right through the center of the country today. Areas from Kansas over towards Illinois this morning. There will be a little bit of severe weather with this, so just watch for that. But take a look at this. Still baking summer down across the south. If you want summer still, go to Atlanta, 96 today. Too hot. Guys?
All right. Rick, appreciate it.
Thank you, Rick.
The president delivering a big win for the courts. Conservatives.
Potential to flip back 8 congressional seats back to Republicans here in California. You are the ones who will go out and knock the doors. You will be the ones that go out and make the phone calls. We need you to do a lot more for your state.
We are back with some quick 2020 headlines. President Trump's campaign manager, Brad Pascal, says the Republican Party is planning to make a California comeback, noting a handful of congressional seats could swing to Republicans. And 2020 hopeful Elizabeth Warren, who the president calls Pocahontas, is reportedly speaking on the sidelines with Hillary Clinton. NBC News reporting the two have been in, quote, substantial contact since Warren launched her campaign. Jed, down to you.
Thanks, Pete. President Trump delivering a huge win for conservatives on the courts. He took to Twitter saying, quote, I want to congratulate Mitch McConnell and all Republicans. Today I signed the 160th federal judge to the bench. Within a short period of time, we will be at over 200 federal judges, including many in the appellate courts and 2 great new U.S. Supreme Court justices. So what impact will these appointments have on the courts in the long run? Joining us now to discuss, former law clerk to Justice Clarence Thomas and Chief Counsel and Policy Director at Judicial Crisis Network, Carrie Severino. Carrie, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Jed.
So a lot of people talk about the Supreme Court. In fact, that was one of the reasons that a lot of people went out and voted for President Trump. But what about these lower court appointments? Why are they so important?
Yeah, a lot of people, I mean, it's right to emphasize the Supreme Court, clearly very important, but people don't realize 99+% of cases actually end at the lower courts. So you need to get it right there. The Supreme Court cannot fix all the errors. And we've seen really troubling behavior in the lower courts. You know, you look at some of the immigration cases, some sanctuary city cases, where you have lower courts effectively saying that they have created a law that's special for President Trump. This is not the rule of law where you apply a different standard to President Trump than you would to any other president. We need judges who are going to apply the same law across the board, and thankfully that's the kind of men and women that we've seen President Trump putting on the courts. They're committed to the law, the Constitution as written.
So let's take a look at some numbers. If you look at the federal circuit court appointments in the first 2.5 years of presidencies, if you look at President Trump, you have 43, President Obama 20, Bush 27, Clinton 25. So Trump far ahead there with 43. What do you make of those numbers?
Yeah, that is largely because of a real emphasis that this president and the Republican Senate has put on getting the appellate judges confirmed. That's because they are the higher court judges. They're not doing the trials. They're doing the appeals. It's really important to have those judges confirmed first because it's the most important seats, and they have been the most exceptional nominees that Trump has had. What's frustrating is that all of the judges across the board haven't had the same success because Democrats have put up really unprecedented levels of opposition. Even judges who have unanimous support in the Senate, they have made go through procedural hurdle after hurdle. We've seen really shameful anti-Catholic and most recently anti-Semitic attacks on these nominees. So what's incredible is that they were able to accomplish that with such a headwind by the Senate Democrats.
There are also 39 federal judicial nominations awaiting Senate confirmation. Do you have any predictions on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this Senate and Leader McConnell's been very clear. He wants to leave no nominees behind. He's going to get these nominations through. I think that's so important. And that the White House has to really keep moving because, unfortunately, vacancies have outstripped the confirmations even still. So we have to keep moving again with such opposition that the White House is going to have to keep nominating the Senate, keep confirming just to keep up with the pace of retirements.
And just quickly, there's been a deep concern in this country about judicial activism. You talked a little bit about before about Trump's picks. Do you think people have more confidence generally now that President Trump is in office, that those picks will be constitutionalist consistently moving forward?
Oh, yeah. I think, as you said at the beginning, it's a reason Trump was put in office because people wanted to see the kinds of judges that were on his Supreme Court list in terms of filling the courts. But I think it's even more clear now that we have this track record of just very exceptional men and women with a history of having those constitutionalist principles and then of having the courage to stand up for them. Because you know that judges get a lot of pushback from the media, and they need to be able to stand firm.
They sure do. Well, Carrie, thanks so much for being here as always.
Thanks.
The 100